Alan Simpson, now, I don't know if he gets paid to go around doing this. We do know that he gets, somewhere around 40 grand a speech when he's charging people. And yeah, he's an old guy who likes to fly around, feel relevant. I mean, who wouldn't want to go on The Daily Show, right? And we see evidence of Simpson trying to court the youth by going on The Daily Show and also doing a Gangnam Style parody, which we'll play maybe after this. But Gangnam Style, apparently, I mean, I've seen the video. But it is a South Korean singer who is mocking. The song is about mocking I guess Gangnam is a neighborhood, right, in South Korea, that is rather posh. So he's mocking, essentially, people like Alan Simpson. People born with the silver spoon in their mouth. Simpson's father, I think it was a senator, and so that's, we know how Alan Simpson rolls. So Simpson goes on Jon Stewart's program, and I don't think that we can underestimate the influence that Jon Stewart has on young people. So it's a great place to go if you're trying to lie to young people, and not just to reach those people, but also, sadly, to some extent, and I know many of you love Jon Stewart, and I like him. I've always been a fan, but there are some areas where he's a little bit, uninformed, or just not. I'm going to say uninformed. And you know what? And if I was a little bit older, maybe, and I was making that type of cash and I'm doing a comedy show, I wouldn't spend my time necessarily getting so informed. Although, on the other hand, I don't think I could have Alan Simpson on the program if I didn't sit down with somebody who could actually tell me, like, where are the points really that this guy is selling that are bull. All right, so let's start at the beginning with this. And you should know, like I was saying yesterday, Alex Perrine had a great piece about Simpson Bowles being magic. That everybody praises Simpson Bowles, and no one really knows what's in it, at least to the extent that, I'm sure they do know. But you hear those on the right praising Simpson Bowles, yet it calls for even greater tax cuts that seem to be on the table right now. Excuse me, tax increases that seem to be on the table right now. It calls for cuts in spending, all of which will shrink the deficit. And this gets back to the point that I was trying to make yesterday. The guy I was driving up to Worcester didn't know that the fiscal cliff will shrink the deficit, and that's why everybody's afraid of it. Well, so too would the Simpson Bowles plan. So it is no solution to the fiscal cliff. It is the fiscal cliff in and of itself. And Perrine, in his piece, pointed to, I guess it was a rather non-scientific poll, but it was in Business Insider. And presumably, right, these are the people who are really interested in the fiscal cliff. A plurality of people had no idea that the fiscal cliff will contract the deficit. There's simply a presumption and a mistaken presumption that the reason why we have this financial crisis is because of the size of our debt and deficit, as opposed to our debt and deficit being as large as it is as a function of the financial crisis. And that the reason why people are afraid of the fiscal cliff to the extent that anybody is, it's because they're afraid it's going to shrink the deficit and therefore sink the economy, because austerity at a time of weak economic growth is like putting gas on that fire of economic growth? No, that's the opposite. It's bad for economic growth. Let's put it that way. And so let's go to this first clip of Simpson on Jon Stewart's show, because there's a couple of things that need to be corrected here.
So let me start with you. 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, you are approached to chair a committee with Erskine Bowles that is going to set up a deficit reduction plan or a debt plan for the country. And you come out with your plan, you study it, you're very diligent. Everybody hates it within 24 hours. The Democrats say it's too austere. The Republicans say you're raising taxes too much. 2 years later, as we stand on the precipice of a cliff, suddenly this plan is seen as the most reasonable thing in town, and people are coming to you to find out your sage advice. What happened in those 2 years?
Positive. Well, I'll tell you what happened. Pete Peterson sunk another several $100 million into advertising little kids. The debt is going up. Pete Peterson flying in journalists into think tank conventions and conferences and putting ads out there and encouraging business groups to, why don't you bring Simpson Bowles in at 40 grand a pop? And of course, nobody wants to tell the truth to the American public. On one side, you've got weak-kneed administration officials who don't feel they can sell Keynesian economics anymore. And on the other hand, you've got Republicans who really just want to slash government services and taxes for the rich, and they can't tell anybody about the implications of their austerity. So that's what's happened. And also, commentators like Jon Stewart don't necessarily do all the work they should. And so they have guys like Simpson on because he's an old coot and he's interesting. Good.
Well, the people woke up. I think young people are waking up. You can't do this. You can't tax your way out of this hole. You can't grow your way out of this hole. We had, every economist said you could have double-digit growth for 20 years and you can't grow your way out of this hole.
Pause it. Did you hear what he just said? First of all, the idea that we could have double-digit growth for 20 years, I don't think that's ever happened. I don't know that we've had double-digit growth. I don't know that we've had double-digit growth for more than 2 or 3 years, ever. The idea that we could not get rid of the deficit or debt with double-digit growth for 5 or 10 years is just absurd. It's absurd. Now, maybe the double digits he's talking about is something like 1.1% growth. Maybe those are the 2 digits he's talking about. But this guy, I don't know if he's just lying or he's just senile. But that's just absurd. And that would have been a really good place for Jon Stewart to say, wait, excuse me, what? You're saying that if we had 10% growth for 20 years, we would not raise enough revenue? Now, I don't think it's possible, frankly, to have that type of growth, maybe even for 1 year, because of our limited resources and just because of how astonishing that would be. But so that's his first sort of big lie that goes uncontested.
You can't cut spending your way out of this hole. Everything we did and said, and we got 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and a range from Dick Durbin of Illinois, a great progressive Democrat, and Coburn of Oklahoma, a progressive conservative, and 5 Dems, 5 Republicans, 1 independent. That's a supermajority. And for God's sake, the reason we were so successful is that we
supermajority? Well, sadly, the committee was not set up to ratify a proposal with a supermajority. It was set up to ratify a proposal with 14 out of its 18 members. So really, what Jon Stewart could have said at the beginning is, hey, your proposal failed. It was charged with 14 out of 18 people. There was a reason for that. You couldn't get it. Your proposal failed. I mean, even, I guess Stewart could have started this whole thing by saying, what do you mean, this hole? What do you mean by hole? What are the implications of this hole? Good.
We were so successful is that we effectively pissed off everybody in America.
Congratulations, sir.
There you go.
Kudos to you.
Hey, you know who else pissed off everybody in America? The guy who pushed that guy onto the subway tracks. This notion of, we pissed off everybody in America, we must be doing something right. Really? Really? Just like that guy, the guy who pushed the subway, the guy to his death on the subway tracks. It probably pissed off everybody in America. Must be doing something right. All right, now we got the second clip, right? All right, let's go to the second clip.
And even in Simpson Bowles, there's a lot of talk about corporate tax rates and lowering them and making them more competitive. In my eye, corporations have had, over these last 20 years, the run of the place. They have, if you look at it factually, corporate profits are at an all-time high.
You're high, they're low.
That was a Freudian slip of
You're high, they're
proportions.
low.
Corporations are all-time hoes. No, but their profits are at an all-time high. Worker wages have stagnated even as productivity has gone up. So I guess I'm confused as to why we are chasing their favor when they seem to have had such a good run over these past 20 or 30 years.
Okay, great point. Now, here's where Alan Simpson starts going into complete nonsense speak. I mean, the idea that this guy is respected as a thoughtful person on this stuff is just ludicrous. He's barely comprehensible in this. Good.
Yeah, well, our corporate tax rate is the highest in the world. And so,
But not actually.
well, 36% is where we're at. What we did, we took away
Pause it.
all of these taxes.
It is true that our corporate tax rate at 35% is one of the highest in the world. It is also true, as Stewart got to, that they don't actually pay that. They don't come close to paying that. Very few corporations come even close to paying that as an effective tax rate.
Expenditures, all of these deductions, all of this stuff, this is just earmarks by any other name, and it's spending by any other name, and it's at $1.1 trillion a year. And only 20% of the American people use 80% of the stuff in that tax code. Does that give you the wake-up call of who's gimmying the system?
Right.
Okay.
But see, that brings up an interesting
And so we
point.
got rid of all of that, and we say, now give the American people from 0 to 70 grand, they pay 8%. From 70 grand to 210,000, they pay 14. Everything over that, 23. Take the corporate rate to 26 from 36, and not tax them twice when they bring it back. And when they bring it back, the Democrats...
All right, pause it. I mean, this guy's conflating so many different things here. He's talking about tax expenditures for the wealthiest individuals in this country. He's not addressing corporate taxes at all in that whole run of gobbledygook that he just laid out there. I got no problem with getting rid of some tax expenditures. Not at all. It won't happen. We also know what happens when you do that. Ronald Reagan did it in the mid-'80s. They got rid of the loopholes. They got rid of all the deductions. They dropped the tax rates. And then guess what? 2 years later, all the loopholes, all the deductions, all the tax expenditures, they came back. If you don't believe me, go Google Fred Grandy and I on Kudlow. Grandy, actually, Gopher, was in the Congress at that time, and he offered that. And now he's getting into, now what Simpson's talking about, I mean, he just seems to throw out stuff without even having it in any way contextualized. What Simpson's now about to talk about is the notion of repatriation of profits from U.S. corporations and money that they make overseas.
Says a Democrat. The Democrats will say, well, they'll just use it for dividends and to buy stock. And he said, well, hell, at least they'll be using it in the United States of America instead of sticking it over there and leaving it.
Right. Although they could also just use it for bonuses or to send it over.
Yeah, they'll
Although
do all
between
that.
you and I.
Pause it. Now, understand that the reason why U.S. businesses who are centered and based in the United States keep their profits offshore is because when they bring them back, they are subject to U.S. corporate tax rates. They are allowed to defer bringing back, repatriating these profits because of a plan that Eisenhower started, I believe it was, in the 50s, to encourage foreign investment. We do not need to encourage foreign investment anymore in this country. So the question is, and allow them to bring it back at a lower rate. So, yeah, okay, they use it for dividends and they just give it to rich people. But at least they're spending it here. Well, how about let's go back to pre-Eisenhower, where they can't keep it offshore, where every year they've got to record their profits and they've got to pay a tax rate. That's not even on the table as far as this guy's concerned.
Be perfectly frank, and you're a Republican. Between you and me, they really are the crazy people in this one. Like, are they not?
No, the AARP are the crazy people.
Oh, Pete. Don't say that because I just joined. Can you stick around for a little?
Now, that would have been a great time for Jon Stewart to say, "What the frick are you talking about?" But he's got a comedy show, so he makes the joke and he's got to take a break. All right, so they come back from break, and this is where Alan Simpson really, he's supposedly a traitor to his class being older people, as opposed to what his class really is rich people. Continue.
Republican Party. Now, let me tell you what that is. That's like betting your country. That's really stupid. Because I'll tell you, there's a group out there that doesn't give a damn about Republicans or Democrats or presidents, and it's the people we owe $16 trillion to.
Isn't that mostly us? Aren't we the largest debt holder in our own country, the Fed?
Half of this is owned by private people in New York or Cody, Wyoming. The other half is owned by the feds, and half of that's owned by China. So that's the debt. You can't just forgive it.
Well, pause it for a second. Now, for those of you who are not clear on remedial math, you can only have two halves. You can't have three halves of something. Now, if he was saying, I don't know what he's saying. He's saying half of the federal debt is owned by China and blah, blah. Let's be clear on who owns the U.S. federal debt. 19% of the debt is owed to the Social Security Trust Fund. About $2.7 trillion. 11.3% of the debt is owed to the Federal Reserve. 8% of our debt is owed to China. 8%. 6%, almost 7%, is to those private people in Wyoming and New York. Not half. 6% is about 44% less than half. Just for those of you who aren't good at math out there. Now, this is the guy who's in charge of the so-called debt commission. Not so good with numbers, apparently. 6% of our debt is held by Japan, 3.5% by state and local governments, 3.5% of pension funds, 2.4% United Kingdom. Then you have money market mutual funds, and some more states and municipalities that get about 2 or 3% each. Some retirement funds. So he's talking out of his ass. But China, they're Chinese. So we're going to just say half the debt to China. Instead of 9%, and they're relying on our stability of our country so that they can maintain their growth and everything else that they do over there. Without a stable United States, China falls into the Red Sea or the Chinese Sea or some sea. And I'm speaking metaphorically, of course. So those people out there who are worried about the debt, I don't think so. Continue.
Our Republican candidate said, forget debt. Well, I said everybody would like to, but the creditor.
Right.
And so here you have a situation where the markets are going to call the shot. They're going to say, you proved it. You're a dysfunctional government. You also proved you're addicted to debt. You're $16 trillion. You don't need a stimulus. What the hell do you think a $1.1 trillion deficit is per year if it ain't a stimulus?
Right.
It's money that you borrowed and you don't have any, it's more than it comes in. So the markets are going to crack down, and at that point, they'll say, we don't give a damn about who's out there. But I'll tell you one thing, you guys are history, but we're going to give you more money, but we want more money for our money, and interest rates will kick up and inflation will kick in, and the guy that gets screwed is the little guy, the middle class.
Let me ask you this.
All right, there he is. He's a middle class champion, Alan Simpson. What he's saying there is, there's two basic things he's saying. One is he's saying, we got $1.1 trillion deficit, and incidentally, you'll recall that when President Obama was inaugurated, on the day he was inaugurated, the deficit was projected to be $1.7 trillion for 2009. So it has shrunk at its fastest rate over the past 3 years at any time since, I think, 70 years. Despite the fact that we haven't had double-digit growth for 10, 20 years. And this is what deficit huckery is. This is when people say bond vigilantes. This is what they're talking about. Alan Simpson is arguing that those people who are loaning us money, either the Social Security Trust Fund, which holds 19% of our debt, or the Federal Reserve, which owes 11.3% of our debt, or I guess the Chinese, which are desperately tied to our economy, and they only own 8% of our debt, are going to say, we're not going to buy your debt anymore because you're addicted to debt, and we're only going to buy your debt for a higher percentage rate. In other words, when we loan you money, we're going to require a higher percentage rate on that, and then it's going to be impossible for you to maintain your books. This is what's happened to Greece because they don't have control over their own currency. So to buy a Greek bond, I don't know, you get a 25% return because you think they're going to default. Now, supposedly this is going to happen to the United States, but what Alan Simpson does not say, and what Jon Stewart does not say, well, then why is it that people are loaning us money on a 20-year note that, if you include inflation, actually costs them money? Right now, when the United States government borrows money on a 20-year note, if you factor in inflation, the government makes money. That's how low the interest rates are that the U.S. government has to offer to potential loaners to this country. So what Alan Simpson is talking about is a fantasy. And that's really what Jon Stewart should have questioned. I mean, of the several things I pointed out. That would have been a big one. Continue.
Get you there, but I'll tell you what will get you there is both sides posturing this business that if you touch the entitlements or pressure, let me tell you, health care is on automatic pilot. And the reason it will never work, doesn't matter, call it Elvis Presley care if you want to, but it can't work because there's no cost containment except down the road. So you remember the law said that the docs were making too much money, we cut them? Well, who shows up all day long at the Congress? The docs. We won't treat people, we'll do this. Well, now we did a doc fix, that'll cost us $275 billion over 10 years, and they'll never, ever reject anybody down the road. But I tell you, if you think this can work when you got to take care of a 3-year-old with a pre-existing condition live to be 60, when one person in the United States weighs more than the other 2, that's a statistic, diabetes A and B, guys who choose to do booze, drugs, and the whole works, and you're going to pay for them. If you think they're going to go into a preventive health program, the drinks are on me. And
this guy is one of the 2 chairmen of this debt commission, and he's insane. He can't even string together a coherent sentence. All he's saying is, we got to cut entitlements because you got fat people and we got 3-year-olds who got a cost containment doc fix, and you got to do the Medicare patch and the he's going, I mean,
drinks on me.
Drinks on me. I'm already drunk. And this is where Jon Stewart has really the only thing you could say at this point.
And all the rest of it. And you got people turning, no, just 2 more.
Thank God you're a senator, because otherwise you're just a dude in a chair by the highway yelling at people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to just correct Jon Stewart. This guy's no longer a senator. So he's just a dude in a chair and along the side of the highway yelling at people.
Who you invited on your show?
What's that?
Who Jon Stewart invited on his show?
Right, indeed. And so this notion of cutting entitlements, well, there it is. I mean, that's basically what it gets down to. I rarely attribute any type of real, personality defect in these policy things. I usually see them in a sort of broader strokes. But this guy really does think that there's something immoral about seniors not having enough anxiety in their retirement. First off, we know there was a report that came out, I think it was today, by the Kaiser Foundation on the implications, and this is something I've been saying, about what happens when you raise the Medicare eligibility age. Lifting the eligibility age from 65 to 67 in Medicare would reduce the federal spending by about $5.7 billion. This is in the first year of its full implementation. But that would be offset by $11.4 billion in spending by other people. In other words, the people who have to pay for their health insurance on the private market. $3.7 billion in higher costs for 65 and 66-year-olds, $4.5 billion from employers through company-sponsored insurance programs, $0.7 billion from state governments, $2.5 billion in higher average prices for third parties. Once these younger people are taken out of Medicare and out of that risk pool, so you increase the cost in Medicare, and you're going to increase the cost in private insurance because now you're putting older people, 65 and 66-year-olds, who are otherwise covered by Medicare, into the private insurance risk pools, and those are the people who are going to use health insurance more than anybody else, statistically speaking. So it doesn't save anybody any money except for arguably the government, but at the end of the day, you know this is going to end up costing private individuals more. And that means that our grandkids who poor old Grandpa Simpson cares about are going to pay for their grandparents and their parents to get health insurance when they're 66 and 65. And even insurance companies are worried about it because they're going to have to have a worse risk pool. Now, I will say this. Consistent with what we were talking about yesterday, Nancy Pelosi came out at 3 later that afternoon and said, I am very much against that. I think most of my members are in terms of raising the Medicare eligibility. I don't see any reason why that should be in any agreement. So we're seeing a stiffening of the spines of Democrats, which is why old man Simpson's out there making Gangnam Style parody videos to try and appeal to kids. We'll play it. Let's play it right now.
Stop Instagramming your breakfast and tweeting your first world problems and getting on YouTube so you can see Gangnam Style.
Gangnam Style.
He's dancing.
Start using those precious social media skills to go out and sign people up on this baby. 3 people a week, let it grow, and don't forget, take part or get taken apart. Boy, these old coots will clean out the treasury before you get there.
Now he's dancing again.
The lasso again, and then the horseback. Horse. Get on the ready, the cowboys ride, the cowboys ride, the cowboys.
I don't know what to tell you. That last part wasn't part of the video. That was apparently just stolen footage. I'm joking. Unbelievable. Unbelievable nut job, this guy. And you should know when we talk about Social Security, I've said this many times before, but over 50%, we didn't have that part where he was going through, somehow we missed it. At one point during his interview with Stewart, he talks about what they're proposing in terms of entitlement cuts. And he says, we're going to make the cost of living increase more productive. And Stewart doesn't catch it, but what that means is we're going to cut the cost of living increases for Social Security. Over 50% of Social Security recipients rely on Social Security for 60% of their income. In the second highest quintile, in other words, you divide up income for senior citizens into 5 groups. The top group, Social Security makes up, I think, only about 20% on average. For the next group, it still is the biggest source of income. And for about half of that group, it's about half of their income. And we're talking your average Social Security payment somewhere around what, $1,200, $1,400 a month. So there's nobody out there who's living high on the hog because they're getting Social Security. And so, you know, I really think if you're going to invite this guy onto your show and allow him to further his plan to reach out to the youth and get them to F themselves, you owe it to your audience to do a little more work on this. But I do appreciate your doing it and releasing the video so that I could do that work.